The throne room of Queen Salith was not a room. It was an open space carved into the top of a crystal mountain, with no roof and no walls. The sky above was filled with 3 suns and a band of glowing nebula dust that painted everything in shades of purple, gold, and deep blue. The floor was made of something clear, like glass, and far below it, Ethan could see the core of the planet pulsing slowly, like a giant heartbeat. He walked alone. That had been the rule. His crew stayed on the Dawnbreaker, under Velhari guard. Maria had argued against it until her face turned red. Lucy had given him that data chip. Danny had saluted. And now Ethan was here, one human being walking across a crystal floor, while 10,000 aliens watched him in total silence. The Velhari filled the terrace slopes around the open space, like an audience at a stadium. Soldiers in armor that glowed faintly, scholars in long robes, priests wearing crowns of floating light, all of them silent, all of them staring at the small creature walking toward their queen. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him, like a hand pressing against his chest. He kept walking, one foot in front of the other. He had learned a long time ago that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was being so scared you wanted to throw up, and walking forward anyway. At the center of the open space, sitting on a throne that seemed to grow out of the mountain itself, was Queen Salith. She was nothing like the pictures in the human intelligence files. Those pictures showed a distant, cold figure. In person, she was something else entirely. She was almost 9 feet tall, even while sitting down. Her skin was deep silver, and it glowed from the inside, like moonlight trapped underwater. She had 6 arms, each one decorated with thin chains made of metal that changed color when she moved. Her 4 eyes were large and bright, and they locked onto Ethan with a force that made the edges of his vision go blurry. But the thing that surprised him most was her face. She did not look angry. She did not look disgusted. She looked curious. Deeply, honestly curious, like a child seeing something for the first time. He had not expected that from a being who was older than most human civilizations. "Ethan Cole," she said. Her voice filled the entire space without any speakers or technology. It vibrated through the crystal floor, and into his boots, and up through his bones. "You are smaller than I expected." A wave of something passed through the crowd, maybe amusement. Ethan swallowed hard. "Most things are, Your Majesty, when you are 9 feet tall." The wave became a murmur. Nobody spoke to the queen like that. Nobody used casual words with a living goddess. The corner of her mouth, which was wider than a human mouth, with lips the color of dark purple stone, turned upward slightly. "You destroyed the Ascendant Blade," she said, "a warship that had served my empire for 800 years, a ship crewed by 12,000 of my best warriors. You did this with a vessel that my people describe as a metal box with engines attached to it." Ethan felt sweat running down his back. "It was a very good metal box, Your Majesty." The queen laughed. The sound was like nothing Ethan had ever heard. It had layers and music in it, and it resonated through the crystal and the air, and even through the bones in his chest. The Velhari around them looked stunned. Several of the priests turned to each other with wide eyes. "I have lived 6,000 years, Salith said, leaning forward on her throne. Her 4 eyes seemed to look not just at him, but into him, through his skin and muscle and bone and into whatever was underneath. "I have conquered empires that stretched across galaxies. I have watched stars being born. I have watched stars die. And in all that time, no species as young and as breakable as yours has ever surprised me." She paused, and the silence was so heavy Ethan could feel it pressing on his shoulders. "You have earned something no being has earned in 3,000 years, she said. Ethan waited. He did not trust himself to speak. "A wish," the queen said. one wish. Anything that is within my power to give, and my power, little human, is very large. I can give you territory, technology that would push your species forward by 1,000 years, wealth beyond anything your kind has ever imagined, a military alliance that would make humanity untouchable. I can even bring back your dead crew members. I can make you live as long as I do. She spread all 6 of her hands outward, a gesture that seemed to encompass the entire world, the entire empire, the entire galaxy. Name what you want, and it is yours. The amphitheater went completely silent. 10,000 Velhari held their breath. Ethan's mind was racing. He thought about the 17 crew members who had died at Callisto Ridge. He could bring them back. He thought about humanity's weak position in the galaxy, surrounded by older and stronger civilizations. He could change that with one word. He thought about the technology on this world, technology that could solve every problem his species had ever faced. He thought about his parents back on Earth, getting older every day. He could ask to live forever. Every logical thought, every strategic calculation, every sensible answer pointed him in obvious directions. Any one of those choices would make him the most important human being who had ever lived. But logic was not the only thing inside Ethan Cole. Underneath the uniform and the rank and the training, there was something else. Something that had been growing quietly in the dark spaces between the stars for 9 long years. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not what anyone expected. Not the Velhari, not the Queen, not even Ethan himself. Ethan looked at the most powerful being in the known galaxy and said, "I want love." The silence that followed was so deep and so complete that he could hear the planet's core humming far beneath the glass floor. Queen Salith's 4 eyes went wide. For what might have been the first time in centuries, the expression on her face was not power, not control, not amusement. It was pure shock. "Say that again," she said quietly. "Love," Ethan said. His voice was steady, even though his hands were shaking at his sides. "Not territory, not weapons, not a longer life. I want love, real love, the kind that goes both ways, the kind that makes you want to be a better person than you are, the kind that makes the universe feel a little less cold and a little less empty." He paused and took a breath. He could feel 10,000 pairs of alien eyes on him, but right now, the only eyes that mattered were the 4 violet ones staring down at him from the throne. "I have spent 9 years in deep space, Your Majesty. 9 years. I have watched my friends die in the dark between the stars. I have fought battles that I did not think I could survive. And the thing that keeps me up at night is not the death. It is not the danger. It is the loneliness. It is the silence in my room after the alarm stops screaming. It is the empty chair across from me when I eat my meals. It is the knowledge that if I die tomorrow, there is no one in this entire universe who will feel the shape of my absence." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but he kept going. "You could give me a fleet of ships, and I would still be alone inside them. You could give me 1,000 years of life, and I would spend every single one of those years alone. So I am asking for the one thing that I cannot win in a fight and cannot buy with power. I am asking for someone to come home to." The amphitheater had gone completely still. The Velhari warriors stood like statues. The scholars had stopped breathing. The priests looked at each other with expressions that might have been confusion or fear, or something they did not have a name for. The Velhari did not have love, not the way humans understood it. They had duty, they had loyalty, they had genetic bonding programs where matches were made based on bloodline and usefulness to the empire. They had a deep structural devotion to their queen that was closer to worship than affection, but the raw, messy, painful, beautiful thing that this small human was describing, this ache for connection that had nothing to do with strategy or survival, they had no word for it. They had no framework for it. It was like watching someone describe a color that their eyes could not see. Queen Salith stared at Ethan for a very long time. Her 6 hands, which had been resting on the arms of her throne, slowly curled into fists. Her glowing eyes shimmered, and something changed beneath her silver skin. Light began to move under the surface, rippling outward from the center of her chest like rings spreading across still water. The light was not the controlled, steady glow that Ethan had seen before. It was wild. It pulsed and shifted and changed color in ways that made the priests gasp and step backward. "In 6,000 years," she said, and her voice was barely louder than a whisper, though somehow every being in the amphitheater heard every word. "No one has ever asked me for this." Then she did something that made the entire amphitheater go rigid with shock. She stood up. The movement was slow and deliberate, and the effect was like an earthquake. Every single Velhari in the amphitheater dropped to one knee instantly. It was a reflex, built into their culture over thousands of years. When the queen stood from her throne, you knelt. There were no exceptions. Salith walked down the steps of her throne. Her 6 arms moved with a smooth, flowing grace, and the chains on her wrists made soft musical sounds with each step. She crossed the crystal floor toward Ethan, this tiny, breakable human, standing alone in a sea of kneeling giants, and she stopped 3 steps away from him. Up close, the difference between them was almost funny. She was nearly 3 times his height. Her shoulders were wider than he was tall. Her presence alone created a faint pull that he could feel in his jaw and his teeth, like standing too close to a large magnet. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "You have broken me," she said. The words fell into the silence like heavy stones dropped into deep water. "I have ruled for 6,000 years," she continued. "I have been worshipped, I have been feared, I have been obeyed and hated and respected and cursed. I have been offered everything that exists. Power, land, surrender, threats. Every single being who has ever stood where you are standing has wanted something from me. Territory, mercy, their lives." She paused, and the wild light beneath her skin grew brighter. "You are the first being in my entire existence to stand before me and ask for something that I have never been given either." Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. "I have never been loved," Salith said. "Not once, not in 6,000 years. My people worship me, my enemies run from me, my advisors bow to me. But not one single being in this galaxy has ever simply loved me. Not one." She knelt. The queen of 4,000 worlds, a being who had not bent her knee before another living creature in thousands of years, lowered herself down, so that her 4 glowing eyes were level with his 2 ordinary brown ones. "You ask for love," she said, "and by asking, you have reminded me that I have spent 6,000 years without it." Ethan's heart was beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I did not mean to cause you pain, Your Majesty." "You have not caused me pain," she said. "You have caused me something far more dangerous." What happened next became the most talked about event in both human and Velhari history. Queen Salith did not grant Ethan's wish in the way anyone expected. She did not bring him a human woman from some faraway colony. She did not use her technology to build him a companion. She did not assign him a Velhari partner as some kind of political deal. Instead, she did something that had never been done before in 6,000 years of Velhari rule. She asked him to stay. Not as a prisoner, not as a pet, not as a strange animal to be studied. She asked him to stay on Avaris as a guest, so that the 2 of them could find out whether the thing he had described, this thing called love, could grow between 2 beings separated by everything. Different bodies, different cultures, different lifespans. 6,000 years of loneliness on one side, and 9 years of loneliness on the other. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and loud. On Earth, The United Human Coalition broke into a mess of arguments that lasted for weeks. Admiral Patricia Holt, who commanded the Deep Space Fleet, said that Ethan had given humanity the greatest diplomatic opportunity in its history, and that he should be supported fully. Senator Kevin Marsh called it a national embarrassment and demanded that Ethan be brought back to Earth in handcuffs for abandoning his post. Dr. Nina Reeves, the top alien biologist at the Copernicus Institute, went on every news channel and said it was the single most important event in the history of relations between species. Among the Velhari, the reaction was even more intense. The high priests of the Luminous Path, the religious leaders of the Empire, called it a disgusting insult to their goddess. They said that their queen lowering herself to spend time with a creature who would be dead in 60 years was an act of madness. General Kelvoth, one of the most powerful military leaders in the Empire, saw it as a security problem and quietly began moving warships into defensive positions around Avaris. But something unexpected happened among the ordinary Velhari, the billions of common people who lived on the constructed worlds and worked the trade routes and mined the nebulae. They did not react with anger or disgust. They were fascinated. The story of the small human who had stood before a goddess and asked for love instead of power spread across the Velhari communication network at faster-than-light speed. Within days, Ethan Cole became the most famous being in the Empire, not as a fighter, not as a politician, but as something the Velhari had no word for. A romantic. Ethan, meanwhile, was scared out of his mind. He sent a message to Maria back on the Dawnbreaker. "I think I may have accidentally started a problem between two civilizations." Maria replied within minutes. "You absolutely started a problem between two civilizations. Also, Lucy wants her data chip back, since you are apparently not dying today. Danny says, and I'm quoting him exactly, 'What is wrong with you?'" Over the weeks that followed, Ethan and Salith began spending time together. There was no guidebook for this, no rules, no history to follow. A human man and an alien queen, sitting together in the crystal gardens of the most powerful world in the galaxy, trying to figure out if two completely different kinds of loneliness could somehow fit together. She showed him the deep libraries of Avaris, where the knowledge of 1,000 conquered civilizations was stored inside crystal structures that hummed when you touched them. He taught her to play poker. She was terrible at it. She could not understand why humans would invent a game based entirely on lying to each other, and then play it for fun. She explained the Velhari concept of duty bonding, a connection between two Velhari based on shared purpose and matching bloodlines. It sounded efficient. It sounded practical. It sounded incredibly lonely. He told her about growing up in a small town in Colorado, about his mother's cooking, about his father teaching him to fish in a river that was never deep enough to hold anything worth catching, about the first time he saw the stars from orbit and cried because they were more beautiful than anything he had ever imagined. "You leak water from your eyes when you feel strong emotions," Salith said one evening. They were standing on a balcony that looked out over plains of crystal that stretched to the horizon. 3 suns were setting at the same time, and the sky was on fire, with colors that human eyes were not built to fully see. "This is a remarkable design flaw in your species." "It is not a flaw," Ethan said. "It is a feature." "Explain." "Crying is how humans show each other that something matters enough to hurt. It is how we prove that we are not machines, that we feel things so deeply our bodies cannot keep it all inside." Silith was quiet for a while. The light under her skin shifted to a slow, deep blue. Ethan had been learning to read her colors over the past weeks. Blue meant she was thinking deeply about something. "The Velhari do not cry," she said. "When we feel deeply, our light changes, but we are taught from the time we are born to control it, to hide it. A queen who shows her light is considered weak." Ethan looked up at her. Even standing on the balcony, she towered over him. You showed your light when I asked for love, in front of 10,000 of your people." She did not answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "Yes, I did." "Were you ashamed?" "No," she said. The blue light under her skin grew deeper and began to pulse slowly, matching a rhythm that Ethan realized was her heartbeat. He could feel it through the crystal floor beneath his feet. I was relieved. They stood together in silence and watched the three suns disappear below the crystal horizon. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt alone. 5 months after Ethan arrived on Avarice, the crisis came. General Kelvoth and the High Priests had been working together in secret, and they finally made their move. They went before the Imperial Senate with a formal demand that Ethan be removed from Avarice immediately, and that all contact between the Queen and the human species be cut off forever. They said that the Queen had been compromised. They said that human emotions were a form of mental attack, a weapon disguised as weakness. They said that the honor of an empire that had stood for thousands of years was being destroyed by one small soft creature who had no right to stand on their world. The Senate listened. Many of them agreed. Salith was given a choice: remove the human and keep the political peace of her empire, or keep him and risk something that had not happened in Velhari history, a civil war. On the day of the Senate hearing, Ethan stood in a corridor outside the Great Chamber. He was wearing a borrowed Velhari formal robe that was 3 sizes too big for him, and he was listening to the muffled sounds of angry voices arguing behind the sealed doors. He could not understand the words, but he could feel the fury in the harmonics vibrating through the walls. He had already made his decision. He would leave. He would not be the reason an empire of 4,000 worlds tore itself apart. Whatever had grown between him and Salith over these 5 months, something strange and fragile and entirely new to both of them, it could not be worth billions of lives. He would go back to the Dawnbreaker. He would go back to Earth. He would go back to the empty chair and the silent room and the cold space between the stars. He was writing his goodbye message on a small screen when the doors to the Senate chamber opened. Salith stepped out. She was alone. The light beneath her skin was blazing, not the calm, controlled glow she showed in public, not the soft blue of deep thought or the gentle pulse of quiet conversation. This was wild. Colors Ethan had never seen before were cascading across her silver skin like the northern lights he had seen once as a boy in Colorado. Except these lights were alive and they were furious and beautiful and terrifying, all at the same time. "What happened?" Ethan asked. "I spoke to the Senate," she said. "And what did you say?" She looked down at him. All 4 of her eyes were burning with a light he had never seen before. Fierce and open and completely unguarded. There was no mask, no control, no 6,000 years of practiced composure, just her. "I told them that in 6,000 years I have given everything to this empire. My youth, my freedom, my name, my identity. I have been their queen, their goddess, their weapon, and their symbol. I have fought their wars. I have built their worlds. I have buried their dead. And in all that time, I have never once asked them for anything for myself. Not once." She took a step closer to him. The light under her skin rippled with each word. "I told them that I am asking now. I told them that this small, fragile, ridiculous human being taught me something that 6,000 years of power and wisdom could not teach me. He taught me that power without love is just a longer way of being lonely. And I told them that if they force him to leave, I will not fight them. I will not threaten them. I will not use my power against them." Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "I told them I will simply step down from the throne, walk away from everything, and go with him." Ethan stared at her. His borrowed robe was too big. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. "You would give up your empire? For this?" For me, you gave up a wish that could have made your entire species a power in this galaxy. You had the chance to change the future of your civilization, and you chose love instead. Did you think I was not paying attention? The Senate, faced with the impossible idea of their immortal queen walking away from the throne, gave in. The agreement that followed took months to work out. Ethan would stay on Avaris as a formal diplomatic representative of humanity. This gave his presence legal standing in the Empire without suggesting that the Queen was bowing to a lesser species. In return, humanity received a limited agreement to share technology and a mutual defense pact. Not because Salith was trading favors, but because Kelvoth and the Senate needed something to show their people so they could save face. But the real result of what happened was something that no treaty or agreement could capture. Across the Velhari Empire, the story of the human who chose love spread like fire. It jumped from world to world, from ship to ship, from mind to mind. It started as a story. Then it became a philosophy. Then it became something close to a new way of seeing the universe. Young Velhari began questioning the old ways. They questioned the duty bonding. They questioned the rule that said you must hide your light. They questioned the idea that emotion was weakness. They started using a new word, a word borrowed from a human language that most of them could barely pronounce. The word was love. And on a balcony on the crystal world of Avaris, under a sky lit by 3 suns and a river of glowing nebula dust, Ethan Cole and Queen Salith stood side by side and watched the stars together in comfortable silence. A man and an empress, a mortal and an immortal, a human and an alien, standing together on a bridge that neither of them had known they were building until they were already standing on it. Ethan, Salith said, after a long time. Yes, you once told me that love is wanting someone to come home to. That it is knowing someone will feel the specific shape of your absence when you are gone. I did say that. She reached out with one of her 6 hands, the lowest one on her left side, the one closest to where her heart was. She held it open, palm facing up. Ethan had learned over the past months that this gesture was the most personal thing a Velhari could do. It was reserved for moments of complete and total trust. It meant, I am hiding nothing from you. I would feel it, she said, the shape of your absence. I would feel it for the rest of my 6,000 years, and for every year after that. Ethan put his small, ordinary human hand into hers. Her silver fingers closed around it gently. They were warm, and they glowed, and the light under her skin settled into a color he had never seen before. It was not blue, it was not violet, it was not gold. Something steady and warm and quiet. What does that color mean? He asked. It does not have a name, she said. It has never existed before. Above them, the stars burned on, old and uncaring about the small dramas of living things. But on the surface of the crystal world, in the space between a human hand and an alien one, something new had come into the universe. Something that no empire had ever conquered, because no empire had ever thought to try. Something so small and so simple that it had been invisible to a civilization that could build worlds and move stars. And for the first time in 6,000 years, the Queen of the Velhari was not alone. The year was 2389, and humanity had spread across 17 star systems. They had built colonies on distant worlds, made deals with alien races, and learned to survive in a galaxy that did not care about them. But none of that mattered now. Not to Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cole. Not today. Ethan stood on the bridge of his ship, the Dawnbreaker, a small human frigate that looked like a tin can compared to the 3 massive warships surrounding it. Those warships belonged to the Velhari, the oldest and most powerful empire in the known galaxy. They ruled over 4,000 worlds. Their queen had lived for 6,000 years, and right now, They had Ethan and his crew of 42 people trapped near the edge of the Kairos Nebula, with nowhere to run. "They are hailing us again, sir," said Lucy Grant, his communications officer. Her voice was calm, but Ethan could see the fear sitting behind her eyes. "Put it through," he said. The view screen lit up and showed the face of a Velhari commander. She was tall, with silver skin and 4 glowing violet eyes arranged in a diamond shape on her forehead. When she spoke, her voice had layers to it, like 3 people talking at the same time. It made Ethan's ears hurt. "Human vessel," she said. "You have entered Velhari space. You will be taken to the throne world of Avaris. The Queen has called for your captain." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Nobody got called by the Velhari Queen. She did not speak to ambassadors. She did not speak to presidents. She considered every other species in the galaxy to be beneath her. And she had 6,000 years of history to back up that opinion. "Why does she want to see me?" Ethan asked. The Velhari commander tilted her head. All 4 of her eyes blinked, one after the other. "Because you did something that has never been done before in the recorded history of our empire. You destroyed a Velhari warship." The bridge went silent. Every crew member froze. Ethan remembered the battle at Callisto Ridge 3 weeks ago. It had been a desperate, ugly fight. His crew had used the magnetic field of a gas giant to overload the shields of a Velhari cruiser. It was not brilliant strategy. It was a trick born from panic and clever thinking, and 17 of his people had died to make it work. He did not feel proud of it. He felt sick every time he thought about it. "You will come willingly," the commander said, "or you will come in chains. The Queen does not ask twice." Ethan looked around the bridge. Danny Webb, his pilot, was gripping his controls so hard his knuckles had turned white. Maria Vasquez, the chief engineer, met his eyes and gave him a slow, firm nod. Lucy Grant did not look away. He turned back to the screen. "Tell your queen we are coming." The trip to Avaris took 11 days. The Dawnbreaker was swallowed up inside a Velhari carrier ship, like a small fish inside the belly of a whale. The carrier used something called slipstream corridors to travel, a technology so far beyond human science that Maria spent the entire journey staring at her sensor readings and shaking her head. During those 11 days, the crew was not treated like prisoners. They were treated like animals in a zoo. Velhari officers would walk past the transparent walls of their quarters and stop to stare at them. They whispered to each other in their layered, musical language. Some of them pointed. A few of them laughed. Ethan spent the time reading everything humanity knew about Queen Salith. She was old. Not old like a grandmother. Old like a mountain. She had been born when humans were still living in mud huts and hitting each other with sticks. She had conquered over 300 civilizations. Her people believed she was a goddess, and in all her thousands of years of rule, she had never lost a single warship to a species younger than hers. Until 3 weeks ago. Until Ethan Cole and a crew of desperate humans in a ship that the Velhari considered junk. When they finally reached Avaris, Ethan understood why the Velhari thought their queen was a god. The planet was not a real planet. It was something built, a sphere of crystal and living metal the size of Saturn, glowing with soft purple light that could be seen from orbit. 12 artificial moons circled around it, each one serving as a shipyard or a temple or a military base. The atmosphere itself hummed with energy that the Dawnbreaker sensors could not understand or measure. Danny stared at the view screen from the pilot's seat. His mouth was open. "That is not a planet," he whispered. "That is a god's house." Ethan said nothing. He looked down at his uniform and straightened it. He checked the sidearm on his hip, even though he knew it would be completely useless here. A human pistol on a world like this was like bringing a stick to fight an ocean. Maria came up beside him. "You do not have to do this alone," she said quietly. Yes, I do, Ethan said. They only want me. Lucy walked over and pressed a small data chip into his hand. A message for my family, she said, just in case. Ethan closed his fingers around it. I will bring it back to you myself. Danny turned in his chair and gave a sharp salute. Give them hell, Commander. Ethan nodded once, took a deep breath, and walked toward the airlock. Behind him, the crew of the Dawnbreaker watched their captain leave, and not one of them was sure they would ever see him again. The airlock opened, and the light of 3 alien suns hit his face. The air smelled like ozone, and something sweet he could not name. A path of crystal stretched out before him, leading toward a mountain that glowed from within. Ethan Cole, a man from a small town in Colorado who had joined the Navy because he could not afford college, stepped onto the surface of the most powerful world in the galaxy and began to walk. He was alone, he was afraid, and he had no idea that what waited for him at the end of that path would change the history of 2 civilizations forever.